Hi, everybody. Dr. Larry, the author of Save Baseball, a prescription for the major leagues, here with you with one that is hot off the press. Maybe you've seen it. Did we all see this coming or not? Pete Rose has been reinstated for eligibility for baseball's Hall of Fame. As a baseball fan, I'm ecstatic for Pete Rose, but I'm also quite sad because Pete Rose passed away, as you well know, back in September of last year. On that day, which I believe was September 30th of 2024, baseball fans around the world, many shared a common sentiment at that time, which was, watch, Pete will now be eligible for the Hall of Fame now that he has passed away. And today's that day. So I am going to recap a little bit about what Pete Rose means to me as a baseball fan. But first, as you start to research this topic, and I got about as far as Googling Pete Rose, I read the first story that popped up was by the pompous Bob Nightingale of the USA Today. Does anybody even read that anymore? I didn't even know it was even still around. Of course, he's pontificating. Apparently, he's sinless himself. That baseball is now marred by this decision. Well, let's talk about that. And I respect his opinion, but I think it's garbage because Pete Rose paid the price. Should Pete Rose have bet on baseball? Of course not. However, Pete Rose was banned from baseball in 1989. It's 2025. You do the math on how many years that is. That's a really long time to be ineligible to be voted into baseball's Hall of Fame. Should he have received a consequence? 100%. Should it have been for the duration of his life? I don't think so. And I'll tell you why in a moment. But first, Pete Rose. I'm telling you, fans, if you never had the opportunity to watch Pete Rose play during his playing days, I pity you because this guy was the epitome of baseball. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, I wasn't really a Reds fan, but I was a Pete Rose fan. How could you not be? This guy, nicknamed Charlie Hustle, and this is a great picture of him right here, doing what he did best. And this picture is when he's in his 40s, hustling as he always did. When I thought of baseball and thought of a baseball player back in those days, there's only one player that came to mind. At the top of the list was Pete Rose. This guy was baseball. Not only is he the hit king, this guy lived and breathed baseball. And for me, as a baseball fan growing up in that era, I'm blessed to have seen him play. In fact, my very first National League game that I attended as a kid, I think I was 9 years old, was at Dodger Stadium against the Big Red Machine, and Pete Rose played that day. It was a memory that I will never, ever forget. I got a chance to see him play quite a bit after that, especially when he played for the Phillies and he came to town to play the Dodgers. And this guy played 110% every single time out. He was once quoted as saying, I would walk through hell in a gasoline suit to play baseball. I believe him. And Pete Rose, sadly, is not with us today to enjoy this moment. And there will be another moment, hopefully, down the road where he will be elected into baseball's Hall of Fame. I hope that that happens for Pete Rose. But you're going to have people on the other side of the fence that are high and mighty, that think that Pete does not deserve it. And that's okay. They can have that opinion. But let's unpack this a little bit. So, Pete Rose, back in 1989, Commissioner Bart Giamatti, who I had the chance, by the way, to meet back in the day, right on the heels of this, actually, suspended uh, Pete Rose for life. That was the agreement that Pete made. That's a mistake he agrees or agreed that he should never have made, made, but he did. Nonetheless, he was accused of betting on his own team and also while he was managing the Reds. This occurred during that tenure. So betting on baseball, I agree, 100% um, should be held accountable for that. There's no place for that. And if you have ever been in a major league clubhouse, which I have many times, it is posted right there. You can't escape that. Oh, I didn't know we couldn't bet on baseball. Yeah, yeah, there's no excuse. So he made a tremendous mistake and should never have bet on baseball. I do say this though, he never bet against his team. He only bet for on the Reds to win. So you figured, there wasn't any shenanigans going on there. Certainly hope not. But so Pete Rose denied for what was it, 15 years after that, that he never bet on baseball. 2004, he finally came clean and said, I did. So that was what, 21 years ago. So P. Rose paid a pretty big price for his mistake, and he should have certainly been held accountable. But for how long? That's kind of been the debate among baseball fans. And then when Pete passed away last fall, that argument kind of fizzled because Pete was no longer here. And we knew that this day again was going to come. And then I thought about this a few moments ago as I was getting ready just to open up this video and start talking about Pete Rose is this. There are people in our society who have done horrific, real crimes. I mean, we're talking real crimes to women and children that have served less prison time. Yeah, than Pete Rose did betting on a few games on the Cincinnati Reds. Let's put it in context. There are people that have committed murder, killed people. That's pretty serious, wouldn't you agree? That served less prison time than Pete Rose for betting on baseball. That is asinine on many, many levels. Pete Rose paid his price. Sadly, he'll never be able to enjoy the fruit of that labor in terms of today being off the quote permanent ineligible list. I kind of chuckled when I heard permanent. It's not permanent. But I do want to give credit, and this is rare, that anybody likes to give MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred credit for anything, but we're going to give him credit today because he did the right thing today by allowing Pete Rose to be off that ineligible list and be considered for baseball's Hall of Fame. So if you're sitting there saying, I don't really know much about Pete Rose, and yeah, I know he's the all-time hit king, well, you've got a lot of resources today where you can look up Pete Rose and watch him play. And what I would recommend you do is, yeah, watch the highlights, but there's got to be a game or two out there that you can sit, relax, and watch the game and kind of get the feel of what Pete Rose meant. I'll give you a couple of um, suggestions. Pete played in scores of seemingly all-star games. Pick any one. Nobody's working harder in an all-star game, an exhibition, than Pete Rose. Of course, the 75 World Series, many have thought the Reds and the Red Sox was the greatest World Series of its time. It's one of the first ones that I remember. Pete Rose was amazing. Check it out. The other one I would suggest is the 1980 World Series when he was a member of the Phillies against the Kansas City Royals. He helped lead them to a World Series championship. So when you think back at the iconic players and characters of baseball, Pete Rose is right up there at the top. For me as a baseball fan, again, I did not grow up like loving the Cincinnati Reds. I grew up in my youth in the probably, until I was about 12 or 13. I loved the Dodgers and loved the Angels because they were my two teams. So those are my teams. And in the 80s, I appreciated Pete Rose greatly for what he did and accomplished, but I was not a Cincinnati Reds fan or a Phillies fan or that little brief time he played with Montreal. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that Pete Rose, broke the Ty Cobb's all-time hit record playing against San Diego Padres. And I remember listening to that game. I was working at the time. I'm driving in Orange County and I'm listening to the Padres radio with Jerry Coleman. Love Jerry Coleman. He was amazing. And he was as excited as anybody else that Pete Rose broke that record. And remember, Jerry Coleman, of course, was the play-by-play announcer for the San Diego Padres, but he knew what a huge moment it was for baseball. And it was 1985. Pete Rose broke the record in September that year. I believe it was actually September the 11th. And that was a moment that I'll never forget. But I am feeling mixed emotions today, like many baseball fans, where I think a lot of baseball fans are saying finally, but at the same time, there's some sadness involved because Pete's not here to enjoy it. However, that doesn't mean he's in the Hall of Fame. It just means he is eligible. So I don't have a Hall of Fame vote, but I'll tell you right now, if I did, guess what I'd be doing next fall? I'd be voting for Pete Rose. And anybody who says anything to the contrary about, hey, the Hall of Fame is this pristine place with, men of character, BS. They're all sinners, truthfully. Are we not all? So if we're going to judge people by their character, the Hall of Fame would be a ghost town. There'd be nobody in it. So let's get real. Bob Nightingale, get off your high horse. Wake up. What a disaster. What a joke. But I'll tell you one thing that's not a joke is that Pete Rose is eligible for the Hall of Fame. Stay tuned to this one. Let's see how it comes around full circle when the voting takes place next fall. As always, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. For the love of the game, I'm Dr. Larry.